and I'm a Nevada publisher and author. Been publishing books for the last 37 years on Nevada and Eastern California history. It's been a passion ever since my high school days and through the college days. The area of modern Nevada really was first inhabited by Indians or Native Americans, and they were dispersed throughout Nevada in such a way as there was northern Paiutes, generally east of Reno, along the Humboldt River, up in that area, southern Paiutes around Las Vegas and to the north, and Shoshone, everything in between. That would be the vast majority of the state. And then the Reno, Carson, Tahoe area, it would be Washoe Indians. And the first contact that whites had, that would be Europeans, would be fur trappers and explorers like Jedediah Smith and Francisco Garces down south, and then people from Hudson's Bay like Peter Ogden. This is all about 1827, 1830, so forth. And by 1841, there were a few people coming west along what would become the great immigrant trail along the Humboldt River. The Bartons of Bidwell Party, a few other people like that, people going east. But generally, California was the inhabited area. As far as European people, Nevada, there was no settlements, no inhabitants at all. It was still strictly those three tribes I just mentioned, really four. But by 1846, the Donner Party came west, another party going west to go to California to settle, generally to pursue agricultural and ranching interests. And then finally, in January 24th, 1848, gold was discovered on the American River at Coloma. That's halfway between Placerville and Auburn. And that started the great gold rush to California, the very famous one. It was instantly, the news went around the world. It just as much as the Donner Party. When they were stuck up there on the Sierra Heights in 1846, that news traveled fast over to Australia and many other places around the world. But in 1848, the news was reached the East Coast by people going back from California to the east and Europe around the world, and people were coming from all kinds of directions to come to California. And the maps were being published. Here's the map on the right showing North and South America, travel routes going from New York, Philadelphia ports especially, across the Isthmus of Panama, and then catching other boats up toward San Francisco. San Francisco was by far the largest city in 1848, and around the southern tip of South America to the Cape Horn. And insofar as the map on the left, the area of that was of interest to everyone was the mother lode of the western flank of the Sierra Nevada right here. And you hear San Francisco, the western flank here. People going west overland was another popular route beginning in 1849. And then picking up on the map here, across northern Nevada along the Humboldt River, and then to the east side of the Sierra Nevada. After 1849, there would be about 6 ways to go to the Sierra Nevada, the most popular one being the Truckee River route across essentially where Interstate 80 is now. And the political situation changed rather fast, because by 1850, all of the area of modern Nevada and California, Utah, most of Arizona became part of the United States, because the United States had won the Mexican War in 1848, and Mexico ceded this land to the United States. Still in 1850, that was a great year of immigrant travel across northern Nevada, and Mormon Station was founded on the east flank of the Sierra Nevada in Douglas County, below Job's Peak. There were at least 26 other immigrant trading posts all the way from Woodford's, California, northward toward Mormon Station, now Genoa, and then toward the Carson City area, but only to the east, through the modern Dayton, Silver Springs area, all the way up to the Humboldt River. And all these traders would come. They came in the spring of 1850, knowing there were immigrants coming through. They would trade immigrants traded jaded animals, oxen, horses, whatever, for foodstuffs. The immigrants had some money with them, and they bought land. They bought these things from California traders. All this was made possible because people like John Fremont in 1844, 1845, he had 5 expeditions west, mapped the entire area of what's now Nevada. And you can see here that the mountain ranges, as depicted by John Fremont, are essentially accurate. Over here is Lake Tahoe, and these would be all the area of central Nevada. The Humboldt River is way up here on the top. It was known earlier by St. Mary's River, other names. But the whole idea in 1850 was for immigrants to hurry past the area of modern Nevada. Nothing worthwhile here. Although over in the Dayton area, a few of these immigrants, like Abner Blackburn in 1949, looked at modern Gold Canyon, just northeast of Dayton, and wondered about it, hiked up there and found some very low-grade placer or rock gravel gold ore. But they wanted to go to California, and indeed they hurried on. In 1851, the Mormon Station really became quite a lively settlement. In 1850, there were 84 diarists mentioning Mormon Station. Fewer in 1851 because there was not as many diarists. But still, this was the last big place where there were several people living. Colonel John Reese, beginning in June 1851, and his party, all at the base of the Sierra Nevada, where they grew vegetables, they had fresh animals, traded stock with the immigrants before they went over the pass where essentially modern US 50 is today. One of the controversies about Mormon Station was when was it actually founded. Now in June of 1850, the year previous to 51, the settlement definitely was flourishing right in through October. There's some doubt about whether someone stayed on during the winter. There were a lot of cattle in Carson Valley. The historian H.H. Bancroft wrote later that someone did stay behind. But nevertheless, we concede that point. In June of 1851, the Mormon Station was settled by Colonel John Reese, and that's the actual beginning. But a man named Slater came in May of 1851, and a few others, a man named Chorpening, another, and a couple others, all came in there prior to Colonel John Reese coming in around June 7th, 1851. Slater wrote this book and published it at Coloma, where the gold was discovered in the first place, in late July 1851, and he was complaining about the Mormons in Salt Lake not giving him a good deal for his money, and he gathered signatures to express their dismay and their over the Mormons in Utah Territory. After all, this was all Utah Territory at this time. This book right here, there's only 2 copies known. They're worth more than $10,000 apiece. Other people came through. In 1855, the California Surveyor General wrote a report on the eastern boundary of California. Now he described Mormon Station in great detail. He described the Woodford settlement. By then, there weren't as many of these trading posts. There was one at Ragtown, just west of Fallon. And most of the immigrants, there wasn't many coming through anymore. The settlement to California slowed. The whole scene on the gold mining activity on the west flank of the Sierra Nevada slowed as well. Many people just failed in mining and turned to agriculture. And the earliest mention of Mormon Station in print was the Mormon Waybill published at Great Salt Lake City, Deseret. That was the early name for Utah. And this Waybill is a booklet of about 36 pages, describes travel routes, Los Angeles to San Francisco, further north, and the one across from Salt Lake City to Northern California, specifically mentioning the name Mormon Station. These immigrant diaries were popular because they would describe water situations where good feed was all the way across. For instance, if you were going through Wyoming, you'd find, or through Nevada, let's say, Ragtown, good water, you reach the Carson River, and then a little bit further west, good feed, and then 12 miles further, there would be other descriptions of places. The Carson Valley, where Mormon Station is, was very lavishly described very much by these immigrant diaries, and then they're very valuable today. Some of them, like the Horn Diary, is worth more than $4,000 a day, has a nice little map in it. And to further show that Mormon Station, which by 1855 was renamed Genoa, is really a permanent settlement, and that's the whole idea. The earliest people settling in Mormon Station, 1850 and 1851, said, "We have come to establish a settlement." Or the Walter Pigman Diary, we saw these Mormons on the east side of the Sierra Nevada. They came to establish a settlement, like that. And you can see here in this map, there are 6 or 7 claims, all adjacent. This looks like a settlement. John Reese, and there's a few other fellows on this map. But the Dayton area, which was sort of a latter-day claimant to be the oldest settlement in Nevada, especially around 1998 to 2001, you can see from the very beginning, Stafford Hall, and there's a few other claimants all the way up to Major Williams Ormby in 1856, had 219.5 acres, and there wasn't room for people to come alongside to establish a settlement. The land was claimed. This is all modern downtown Dayton. The first records were of anything in western Utah Territory, now western Nevada, are embodied in this book. And it's about 8 inches by 8 inches and a half inch thick, and describes all kinds of things going on, mostly legal things, marriages, recording of land claims. You see, land claims way back, the United States government really owned all of western Utah, but a person could claim some land almost like a mining claim until the deed situation was perfected and a courthouse was put at Genoa in 1854. The first post office came to Mormon Station in 1853, called Carson Valley. So you see the record, not only as far as maps, insofar as the waybill, that would be the guidebooks, the diaries, majority show, and this record book show that Mormon Station, Genoa, founded in June 1851, renamed Genoa in 1855, is indeed Nevada's first settlement. Here's a map by a man named Ives, and he mentions Genoa in the middle of the map, and then further on the top of the map, he mentions a place called Old Mormon Station, because that's where the settlement was in 1850. And in 1851, it was put right down over here, and that little bend in the road is exactly the way it is in Genoa today. The modern Genoa Lane going to US 395 would streak right across there, across the Carson River. So Here's a very excellent map. It shows that the Mormon station was in 2 different places and was the oldest settlement in Nevada. Colonel John Reese in 1851 came and built this structure along with a few others, gardens and vegetable gardens and corrals. Here's another shot of it. This all burned in 1910, and there's a modern replica on the site. Doesn't look quite like this. By 1855, Carson County was established in Utah Territory. These are all counties in Utah except for Carson County over here, which goes all the way from north of Reno, Pyramid Lake, eastward toward a point north of Fallon, and all the way down near Hawthorne. It was a big county, but the county seat was Genoa. Here's another guidebook, Horn's guidebook. These were used all the way through the mid-1850s. Another one here. Another map, 1855, same thing, shows Genoa, and nothing over here in the area which is now modern-day Dayton. There was simply not a settlement there. Genoa was the settlement, other than Woodford's down here, where there was a sawmill. And so the claim that Dayton is the oldest settlement in modern-day Nevada is just simply lacks a foundation in documents, maps, diaries, guidebooks, and early newspaper accounts. Everything was settled, was anything mentioned in newspaper accounts, in California newspapers, or back east, always settled around Genoa or Mormon Station with a dateline Mormon Station. I found a recent clipping from a New York newspaper, November 1851. Now see, that's the very year of the founding of Mormon Station. And he describes very thoroughly all the Walker River draining over here, the Carson River over here, the Truckee River going from Lake Tahoe over to here. He describes Mormon Station, the activities around here, but this clipping, November 1859, shows nothing around here. Yes, there was a trading post there in downtown Dayton that early, 1852, 53, and there were plenty of activity in Gold Canyon, 2 or 3 miles northeast of downtown Dayton. But nevertheless, these were not permanent settlements. The miners up in Gold Canyon would simply come, and as long as the weather was good and as long as there was water to do the placer or rock gravel gold mining, they didn't really stick around to form a settlement. On the other hand, Mormon Station, since June of 1851, there's been people living there continuously, and there's an outside chance they were living there even since June of 1850. Here is the map of 1855 that shows the Lake Tahoe and Pyramid Lake, and there's Ragtown over here, and there's nothing over here in the modern Dayton area, and here's something called Reese, and that would be the same thing as Mormon Station. Just a few months ago, I found a splendid map by the surveyor of California, who in 1854 published a color map of California, and when he describes anything in western Utah, he shows only one settlement, and that would be Mormon Station on the Carson River, or just west of the Carson River, in Carson Valley. He names those places. He names no other place in western Nevada. It would become western Nevada. So it just seems that the evidence is overwhelming that Mormon Station, Genoa, is Nevada's oldest settlement. So when you talk about this debate, as it was in 1988 through about 2002, it centers around these points of authority. The use of the word settlement. It's a place where people settle down, settle in. The extent and significance of the diaries. The only claim that the Daytonites have is that there were miners up in Gold Canyon, 2.5 miles northeast of Dayton, and they appropriate that as part of Dayton. And certainly there were miners up in there in May of 1851, 1 week before Colonel John Reese came to Mormon Station in June 7 of 1851 to settle permanently, but they didn't stay. Newspaper accounts published not only in California, but in Philadelphia and New York. What about postal records? That's point number 4 on my chart. The first post office in what is now the state of Nevada was Carson Valley Post Office at Mormon Station. The first post office in Dayton was not until 9 years later, and that would be in January of 1862. And contemporary maps, as we've shown here. That, to me, is the dagger in the heart of any kind of claim for Dayton being the oldest settlement. Political changes happened fast during the 1850s. We see here California is very well developed, and by then Mormon Station's over here, and there's a few other trading posts, and people are coming across Nevada as far as the immigrants. Down in southern Nevada, Las Vegas would be right here, and it was in New Mexico Territory. Here's the first map reference to modern-day Dayton. And this would be, here is Lake Tahoe here, called Lake Bigler. There's Ragtown over here. Here's a place called Chinatown. By 1857-58, Chinatown sprang up in what's now downtown Dayton. And then it was, by 1860, it was briefly named Nevada City, took the name Dayton in November of 1851 when a man named John Day surveyed a town site, and Dayton was made the seat of Lyon County. Meanwhile, here is Genoa over here. It was a seat of Carson County, Utah Territory. It gave it up to Carson City later in the decade of 1850, but in November of 1851, the Nevada Territorial Legislature made Genoa the county seat of Douglas County. Here is James Simpson's traveling entourage coming into Dayton in June of in 1859. The previous slide showed the situation as it looked at this time, where there were settlements, Carson City and so forth. But Captain James Simpson made a report later, and what he describes, and here's the title page of his report. He says, yes, there's a couple of settlements, there's people settled over in what is now Dayton. It was called Chinatown. One man, a Chinese, was in there in 1858, and he's mentioned in a diary. Colonel James Simpson mentioned in 1859, and in the first directory of Nevada Territory in 1861, that man shows up. So you see, there's some continuity. That's the thing we're looking for from the settlement of Dayton, before then called Spafford Hall Station, McMarlin Station, Nixon Station, Ormsby's. That's the kind of continuity we want to see are the Dayton people all the way from through the 1850s. It does not exist, whereas it clearly exists at Genoa, Mormon Station, Genoa. Hutchins California Magazine, very, very popular. He came over to see the new discoveries at Virginia City in 1859, and in 1860 he publishes a magazine talking about the Washoe country. And this was the early name, before Nevada Territory was established, for the area of western Utah. He comes over here, goes to Virginia City, sitting on the side of the hill, describes the town in his magazine, and he describes Genoa over here, and the text says, Genoa, the oldest town in Nevada, and until recently the largest town in western Utah Territory, looked like this. And obviously here he had no agenda to fulfill. He was not. He didn't have any any bone to pick with anybody. He just mentions and calls Genoa the way it is, the oldest town in Nevada. Meanwhile, Dayton over here in 1861 along the Carson River, because of the Comstock lode up here, the Dayton grew to be quite a settlement. It got up to a couple of thousand people. And it was the commercial center for all the lower end of the Comstock lode, which goes right through here up to Virginia City, Gold Hill, Silver City. Meanwhile, all this area right up in through here is Gold Canyon. And during the 1850s, there were miners coming all the way up to found a settlement called Johntown before they got up to Silver City. All of this is described in a new book called Devils Will Reign by Sally Zanjani, and she shows that all the way through the 1850s, the settlement in Gold Canyon, even Johntown itself, was rather sporadic, sometimes less than 25 people, and sometimes not even any mention at all anywhere. And so there was no continuity to the Dayton Gold Canyon area, whereas over there at Mormon Station, Genoa, there were regular reports in the California newspaper. There was regular people owning land, transferring land, doing all these kind of things that a settlement does. Up and down Gold Canyon, the situation may look like this. This is a California scene, but shows people placer mining, and it might look like this as well, but not this big of a lake. The big boom in discovery of silver at Virginia City in 1859 and Gold Hill brought all kinds of a rush of people through, and it really populated western Utah territory. People were coming by stage, they're coming by foot, by horse, but in Virginia City they'd see the conditions up there were less than ideal. A lot of wood shacks would just fly away. Meanwhile, Dayton over here by 1862-63 and Gold Canyon grew to be quite a hub of activity. There were early silver mills up and down the Carson River near Dayton. There were actually small mills all the way up towards Silver City, which is just below Virginia City. So when throughout the 1850s, the base of the economy of western Utah Territory, now western Nevada, was these trading posts and agriculture and stock raising and ranching. And the mining was spotty, maybe in little places north of Genoa, south of Genoa, but they didn't amount to much at all. Around Woodford's there was a couple of strikes, but the big gold mining was, of course, in Gold Canyon, northeast of Dayton. It goes up 7 miles all the way up to Silver City, Virginia City, and the miners were steadily working their way up that canyon. Often would abandon when the creek was running low through Gold Canyon, when there wasn't much water there. Or there were other strikes, like in 1859. But a mining district finally was founded in Upper Gold Canyon near Silver City called the Columbia Mining District. And there were some prominent people over there, like Colonel William Ormsby and Sarah Winnemucca were in there briefly. When silver was discovered in May of 1859 in Gold Hill, Virginia City area, soon, within 3 months, brought a rush to Virginia City, founding the town of Gold Hill in Virginia City. But things didn't stop there. People not on the ground floor in those two areas, Virginia City and Silver City, would fan out to the north, going up toward the modern Lovelock area, a place called Humboldt or Unionville. They'd go east toward Lander County, Austin, called Reese River. They went south toward Mono Lake and Esmeralda, they call it, or Aurora. And but one mining camp that was founded as a result of the Virginia City boom, and this was founded in 1860, called Silver Mountain City, and it's just south of Woodford's. There's only a few foundations there today, but it was a city of some importance, one of the satellite towns of Virginia City. And Dayton, of course, being a milling center, would be a satellite, and Genoa became a satellite as well. Every spring from the 1860s right on through the end of the century, the 19th century, there would be wood drives going up and down the Carson River. And what would happen, these wood choppers late in the winter and very, very early spring would bring the water down, would bring wood down to the Carson River, where they were collected in big booms, as you see here. There's a chain or something over here to hold the wood in place until the water was just high enough to send it down from Alpine County, California, through Douglas County, past the Cradlebaugh Bridge, just east of Genoa, and onward toward east of Carson City, and the wood would be retrieved at a point called Empire City, just east of Carson City. And here comes the water, here comes the wood coming down the Carson at a point just south of Genoa. This must have been lots of racket, as all that wood would be floating down the Carson River. And Frenchmen would be imported to help bring the wood down. Now here's the wood caught in a jam over in here, and this would be a good modern jigsaw puzzle, because there's 10 people not hidden, but concealed by all this wood and rocks in this picture. But then the wood would be flowing again down the river. These Frenchmen would have these picaroons. The man on the far left is holding one, and the boat would hold all their bedrolls and food and so forth as they went down the Carson River from Alpine County through Douglas, east of Carson City, over toward a place called Empire City, just east of Carson City, where the wood was taken out. Here's going past the very famous Cradlebaugh Bridge, which is northeast of Genoa, west of US 395 today. And here's some stray logs over in here, and these Frenchmen would use their picks to get the wood back in, flowing down the river. And over at about 5 miles east of Carson City, the wood would be retrieved from the river, Carson River. Here is a wagon loaded and ready to go out toward Virginia City in the early 60s. Although this picture was taken in the 1880s, but it happened that early. And here's another wagon, horse-drawn wagon, wood being gathered. And here's another one about ready to enter the picture. The picture just happened to be dated later, but this phenomena of getting wood down the Carson River was occurring as early as the 1860s. Virginia City boomed mightily beginning in 1860-61, and it drew upon all the timber resources in western Nevada right away. Wood around Washoe Lake, between Carson City and Reno, all around Virginia City to the east, was gobbled up fast. And water was a problem as well, because there was not much ability to get water from wells in Virginia City. So Lake Marlette was called upon to get water. Now, Marlette Lake is east of Lake Tahoe, high in the Sierra, east of Highway 28 that circles around Lake Tahoe, but then north of US 50 and west of Carson City. But it was a big enough lake where water was eventually obtained from here by a very intricate method of flumes and pipes. This man here drew all these areas where Virginia City drew water. Here's Marlette Lake over here. There was a flume going down to Lakeview Summit, and then the pipe was 12 inches wide and just sent the water right up to Virginia City. Lake Marlette is over here, and here's the Tahoe, Lake Tahoe. The water would by means of gravity, would go down to Lakeview Hill or Lakeview Summit, what little summit there is, and the force of the water was so great coming down that it sent the water right up to Virginia City, and this is very well documented. And there were other places where there was flumes as well, where water would come to Virginia City. Another problem in Virginia City was the gathering of wood, timber, wood, for all kinds of purposes, for fuel, to build dwellings, homes, houses, and also to shore up the mines in what's known as the square set timbering method, where timbers were set at right angles to hold up the tunnels underneath Virginia City, and they're just hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath Virginia City even today, all abandoned, of course. But you can imagine how much wood they needed just to supply Virginia City for all those three reasons. And also to build business buildings, but Virginia City would get brick buildings as well by 1862-63. Here's a picture over near Camp Richardson where wood is being cut. And now this idea of getting wood from Lake Tahoe to get up to Virginia City was internationally known, as you see in this German newspaper, where a flume would send the timber right down here to the west shore of Lake Tahoe. Sometimes there would be a rider going down this. That was a sport in those days. They didn't have pro football or pro basketball, but this is what they would do. Different sports happen in different centuries. And here's a close-up of the water and the timber coming right down the flume and being discharged on the west bank or west shore of Lake Tahoe. Here's a flume rider right here. You can see he's riding one of the logs, and from what little I know about the riding the flumes, I don't recall any men dying from this, but maybe it happened. But there was a few stories in the Virginia City newspapers about the flume riders, and this would be still over at the west shore of Lake Tahoe. See, Lake Tahoe in the 1860s still didn't have any settlements except over on the Nevada side. The immigrants disregarded it. The Lake Tahoe was first seen by John C. Fremont in 1844. He spotted it from a point 12 miles away. Didn't even bother to go down and look at the lake. Didn't bother to taste the water. And then finally in 1859, when the big rush came to Virginia City from California, then people traveled along the shore. So the first real activity that was anything permanent was this wood activity. Here is logs cut, hauled away by strong animals here to get over to the west shore of the western side of the shore of Lake Tahoe. And you can see here the same idea as we showed in the Carson River pictures. From the west shore of Lake Tahoe to the east, here's a very small boat carrying in tow all that wood right there in a boom to go over to where the sawmills were, and they were built over on the east shore of Lake Tahoe. At Glenbrook, there was a couple of very famous hotels, and one of them had a bowling alley of all things. But modest meals, so forth, served at this one, and also this one here, the Regal House. And so people came to Glenbrook for recreation. Sometimes some of the people from Virginia City in the early 1860s, getting tired of that high altitude, would come down to Genoa, or come down to Glenbrook, and would see the sawmilling activity, and just mostly for recreation, get a change of scenery from all the mining activity at Virginia City. Captain Prey built a sawmill at Glenbrook in 1861. He's the first. And other people built sawmills as well. And these were very small, but they would soon be replaced by larger ones. But nevertheless, that shows how early Virginia City needed timber. When it was only 2 years old, they were running out. And they would get it from the west shores of Lake Tahoe and also around Glenbrook itself. Finally, I showed you those primitive mills. Here by the 1870s, near Cave Rock, here's very prominent, the Glenbrook sawmill. Then the next problem was how to get the cut lumber from Glenbrook at these sawmills up the grade to Spooner Summit, where US 50 is today, down to Carson City and over toward Virginia City. And so that was solved by the building of the Glenbrook Railroad. And here goes, here's 3 sawmills in a row here all along the east shore of Lake Tahoe at Glenbrook. It was by far the largest community at Lake Tahoe in the 1860s and early 1870s, although a few did spring up over around modern Tahoe City and over in there, a few communities. The Glenbrook situation looked like this as we phase into some pictures of the Glenbrook Railroad. Here the sawmills are over here. Here's the shore of Lake Tahoe right here. And the Glenbrook Railroad ran like this, and it's steep. And anyone hiking that area along the Flume Trail will know this. Went like this, switch back over to here, come back like this, and then over here to discharge the lumber at the top of Spooner Summit right here, where there would be more flumes going down from here all the way to Carson City, 17-mile flume. And here's one of the Glenbrook engines. These are all very rare shots. This would be after the 1860s. That railroad ran for more than 30 years. Sometimes there were recreation possibilities along the Glenbrook Railroad. Here the train chuffs in between these rocky crags here, and of course when a photographer's around, anyone who wanted to get in the act, these kids and so forth, during a outing around the Glenbrook area. Here the Glenbrook Railroad has in tow the cars filled with cut lumber going along the tracks of the Glenbrook Railroad, heading toward the terminus, the eastern terminus of the railroad, which was at Spooner Summit. And here a trestle had to be built at a point just about 4 miles along the railroad, and here a engine is crossing it. It's all gone now. Finally, getting over to the area where near Spooner Summit, here's a switchback area right here, and there's the tracks. To get to where the wood was actually discharged from the train. And you can see it was all neatly stacked over here in these log cars here. They discharged the wood by going down these planks, and here's it's stacked again. And the flume is actually down here. We'll show that more clearly here in a moment. But there'd be several of these cars behind, depending on the weight of the wood being carried up that steep grade from Lake Tahoe, Glenbrook, way up to Spooner Summit. And that's way several hundred, 700 feet altitude increase. So here we have the men discharging the wood, and here's the flume right here. See how wide it was? And the wood right here would just simply be sent right here, and it would go all the way down the Clear Creek grade. That's the first grade south of US 50 at a point, 4 or 5 miles south of Carson City, not quite that far, maybe 4 miles. And then it would turn, the flumes turn north into the south end of Carson City, about where Kuntz Lane is now, maybe a little bit further north. Here's a color postcard of the flume in latter days right here, during the postcard era, which would be around 1898 to 1910. By then, to my recollection, the flumes weren't used anymore. This is all a phenomenon mostly in the 19th century. But here's how steep that flume was. Going all the way down to be filled with wood, filled with water, so that the wood, the cut wood, and sometimes logs as well, could be sent to the south end of Carson City. And again, it was here. This shows how wavy the flume was as it goes through Clear Creek, about halfway between Glenbrook and US 395. And again, this was a sport to ride the flume, if some log or wood was big enough for a flume rider to go, and he'd go real fast like this, right down and real steep, just riding the flume, and sometimes up to 50 miles an hour. And this, in later years, was used as advertising. Here's one where a flume rider was knocked off off his wood cart, as you see. But here's the flume right over here. This would be at the terminus of the flume where the wood was discharged, but it's more accurately depicted in pictures. Here is the nice shot about 4 or 5 miles south of Carson City, showing two of the flumes over here. The flume divided in Clear Creek Canyon over here like this and like this. Carson City's in the background, perhaps during a period of the Pogonip or something like that, because nice little fog here. But the wood would be going all the way to the south end of Carson City, where you had more men discharging the cut wood here, down here. It's piled up over here. Another action shot showing much more lumber being discharged from the flume. Immense amount of water being discharged over there as well, and it would be deposited into the Carson River, just barely to the east. Nice shot showing the terminus of the two flumes right here. The Birch Indian Truckee Railroad, after 1869, built a spur right in the middle of the wood yards south of Carson City. Here's Carson City right here. The V&T would come down here like this and pick up the wood and go right back over up to Virginia City with all the wood. Just an immense amount of wood needed to be gathered, needed to be shipped up to Virginia City. Here's discharged wood over here. Of course, here now it's neatly stacked. Another shot showing the V&T spur coming in through here, the Virginia Truckee Railroad. But here it's closer to Carson City.
Was all of the wood used in Virginia City, or was some of it exported?
No, it's strictly for consumption in Carson City, Virginia City, Gold Hill, Silver City, even Dayton. But if you imagine, these mines needed so much cut wood to shore up those mines and the square set timbering. I mean, if you can imagine hundreds of miles of tunneling, stoping, drifting underneath Virginia City, how much wood is underneath that city today. They'd build a giant-sized city today.
You know what the types of wood that were harvested were? Was it all pine, or was it?
Essentially all pine, and mostly from the west shores of Lake Tahoe. Years ago, when I started exploring for Nevada ghost towns, I was looking down the Clear Creek grade. And US 50, of course, was just 2 lanes at that time. Now it's 4. And there was a few little ruins down there on the south side of US 50 in that gulch. But now it's just hard. There's so much overgrowth there now, it's hard to see anything. And I've never bothered to hike from Spooner Summit downward, down Clear Creek. Although I've hiked up quite a ways, but not down. Something probably could be seen there, but that was the terminus of the railroad right there.
Do you have any idea what the revenues of the timber industry would be compared to like the mining industry at that time?
Well, this is interesting because you'd think in a mining camp, the mines might be the biggest revenue, but like in early Virginia City, early Goldfield, so forth, the saloons in the aggregate were almost as big employers as the mines. And the timber down here at Glenbrook, there wouldn't be that many employed, but Virginia City would have a couple of thousand miners. And then there'd be other people associated to sustain the mining economy. But the saloons, construction industry, like in Las Vegas today, it's I think the second biggest employer besides the casinos. It just keeps on growing. Well, in early Virginia City, Gold Hill, and Goldfield, the contractors, construction aid industries, that was big business. So it was the saloons, the construction people, and the mines. Although the ones that really made all the headlines, of course, they were famous because they were mining camps. The western Nevada, then western Utah Territory, as it was in 1853. This map was published in California in 1854, but it clearly shows Mormon Station with a line through the words Mormon Station, the Immigrant Trail, going through Carson Valley. Further north and to the east, where Dayton would be, or any kind of station there, nothing is shown. So this further documents the fact that Mormon Station is Nevada's oldest settlement.
Are there active mines in the area right now?
Well, in western Nevada, there are only a couple of them over south of Silver Springs. That's 45 minutes east of Carson City. In Lyon County, there's a couple of active mines over near a place called Wabusca. But the biggest mines in Nevada today, of course, are in eastern Nevada, Elko County, Eureka County. The big ones are over there, plus around Round Mountain, and some in White Pine County, a little bit over in south of Winnemucca. That's where all the mines are. Nevada is the 5th largest gold producer in the world. Well, the big thing was most of these mines, like even at Bodie, were in Virginia City, were all big mines with mills nearby, or maybe right in the town, like in Bodie. But after the boom days were over, in the case of Bodie, 1883, 1884, early 20th century, the tailings, which would be the residue after milling, were just reworked. And that was another new industry at Bodie for another 20 years. And the same thing all over the state of Nevada. Wherever there was a tailings pile, or a mine dump itself, often was taken to a custom mill just to rework because there was more values. And now, of course, it's even microscopic gold and minerals where you get values and it's profitable to mine. So it changed over the years.
Yeah, some silly questions. Carson Valley is named after Kit Carson, right? So that seems pretty simple. I don't know who Douglas County's named after.
Douglas County? That would be Stephen A. Douglas, who opposed Abraham Lincoln in the race for the presidency in 1860. Both were from Illinois.
That's true.
Funny thing, in 1861, Nevada Territory had 8 or 9 counties then. They named 2 of them, one Douglas up here in western Nevada, and then Abraham Lincoln County way down southeast Nevada. They put them pretty far apart.
It was a bad debate for Lincoln, or the other guy, Douglas.
And the others were named after Indian fighters and other military people. Highly treasured today are these early immigrant guides. They started as early as 1850, 51, and went right through until the Transcontinental Railroad was built through across North America in 1869. They guided immigrants as they went west, like through Nevada. They would say water, and then next 12 miles would be good feed for the animals, all the way. And Carson's Valley was always described as a very lush green valley, and where immigrants would water their animals and have them fed in the lush green valleys before ascending the Sierra Nevada. After the boom days of Virginia City and all these satellite mining camps we're talking about, the Humboldt region, Reese River, Esmeralda, even and Silver Mountain City, then Virginia City declined in 1878. But on the rise at that time was the new Bodie gold mining district in eastern California. And so a lot of people rushed from Virginia City to Bodie. All the outgoing stages were going to Bodie, and none were back, and all the attention was focused on Bodie and also way down in Tombstone, southeastern Arizona. And there were some mines in southern Nevada as well, Pioche, a place called Belmont, and these were worked. And so after about 1878, for at least 20, almost 25 years, the Virginia City area, Carson area, all of Douglas County, Lake Tahoe itself went into decline. And Nevada's population declined 2 straight censuses, 1890 and 1900. And so there was really not much going on over in western Nevada at all. Reno was becoming a major railroad town. Virginia City was still the largest town in the state, but instead of producing 15, 20, 30, $50 million a year sometimes, it would be just a fraction of that. The biggest mining camps in Nevada were in eastern Nevada, places called
Eureka, and Hamilton. And in 1900, there was one congressman from back east suggesting Nevada turn in its statehood because it only had 42,000 people. But then there was the big strike at Tonopah Silver by the legendary Jim Butler and his burro. And then goldfield discovered 2 years later, and then finally down in Death Valley. That reawoke everything. Even some mines in western Nevada, even some mines in Virginia City started producing again, and new companies were formed. And Douglas County still was more or less agricultural, and Lake Tahoe itself was just not really much going on. There was a few railroads up at the northern end of the Lake Tahoe. The Tahoe Tavern, Tahoe City were all thriving places. South Lake Tahoe was still not even a gleam in a developer's eye. Camp Richardson, some things going on over there. But as World War I rolled on during the Depression, then people started looking at Tahoe for recreational possibilities, and especially after World War II. That's when Glenbrook reawoke, South Lake Tahoe started to boom, city growing into a city there. All the North Shore casinos were being built because gaming was legalized in 1931, and therefore the Nevada side at least prospered because of that. But there was people, writers coming up in this area, artists and writers up in Virginia City. Not much going on, few low-grade mines. Clearly the boom days were over, and Virginia City capitalized on its tourism through being the famous 19th century silver mine camp of North America. Douglas County, again, agriculture. There's a few mines over in the eastern end of Douglas County. And then, of course, over the 50s and the 60s, Tahoe and Douglas County prospered because they became tourist places, tourist spots. And Carson City grew because of the growth of Las Vegas, especially after 1958. Carson City grew, Reno grew, increased gaming, recreation possibilities, skiing, and now, of course, snowboarding. And Carson City grew because the state grew. And, of course, the rest is well known to many people. Las Vegas surged ahead, and Reno fell behind. But other gaming places along the border towns of Nevada, Incline Village, eastern Nevada, which became the modern state of Nevada that we have today in 2007. This was one of the last of these immigrant guidebooks, and it was published over in England because lots of the immigrants came from the continent, from England, before they and bought these things as preparation before going across America, the United States, on their way through Nevada to California.